So this is continuing a conversation on Excel skills that are useful in research. And I'd like to talk a little bit about string manipulation today. And so this falls under my sort of Excel 103 data cleaning module where we are looking at things like find and replace or an if function or some of the abilities to combine strings or tear strings apart in different ways. And I want to illustrate some of these skills with a data set that I've worked with quite a bit in the past. This is the WISE data, World Events Interaction Survey. It was something that was collected by Charles McClellan starting in the 1960s. He would have coffee every morning and read the New York Times and just began penciling down just notes about who were actors who were doing different things to other actors in the international system. And he would record the date associated with that. He would record the actor and the target of that action. And then he's developed sort of this list of codes of different kinds of actions that states might take toward each other. And over time, this data set grew into something like 60,000 different events or interactions between states, and it got extended well into the 1970s when he published it, and then his graduate students kind of continued data collection on through into the early 1990s, and that data set kind of continues to circulate sort of below the sort of informal networks of academics. So I've worked with this data set a lot, but the way that it's set up isn't necessarily the most user-friendly because of the way that Charles McClellan set up his date variable. And so if we look at this first column, that first column is 2 digits for the year, 2 digits for the month, and 2 digits for the day, which is really handy in terms of sorting, but oftentimes I need the day, or I'm sorry, I need the year to be sort of a separate thing. And so if I'm looking at how to separate that out, I can use a formula to grab just the left hand chunk of that string, and I can grab just the 2 most left-hand digits from that. And so I'll just enter in here left, and it gives me sort of a description of what that is, which returns the specified number of characters from the start of a text string. So I put my parentheses, and it says, where do you want to go to get that text? Well, I want to grab from right here, from A2, and then it asks me for my next parameter, and that is, how many characters do you want to grab? And I want to grab 2. So I'm going to just hit 2, and I'll close my parentheses and hit enter. And sure enough, it grabs that 66 right from the front of that. And I can copy and paste that down just as I would with other formulas, and it will always grab the first 2 characters from that line. Okay, so that's kind of handy. However, I don't always want just the year of 66. I want to remind myself that this is 1966. Most often our date formats have more than 2 digits. And so I can adjust that, and I can take whatever I have over here in B2 and I can add 1900 to it. And so now I've created a date that looks kind of like what I would be wanting to work with. And I can, again, copy and paste all those down as far as I want. And I always have my 4-digit year code. If I wanted the day is on the other side of things. And so I could grab the, not the left, but the right. And I can say, okay, text that I want, it's still in A2. And I want to grab the 2 most right-hand side characters. So I'll put in 2, close out my parenthesis, and sure enough, it's going to grab that 0, 1 from the start there, or the end, I should say. I'll even scroll down a little bit further with this to show that it's picking up that last 2 digits from that string. Okay, well, what about the month? Well, for the month, we need to grab something that's in the middle. And so sure enough, there's a mid formula or function that returns characters from the middle of a text string. This requires a little bit more, there's an extra parameter and it requires a little more counting. So I'm going to say mid, and I'm going to open my parentheses, and it's going to ask, where is that going to go? Well, again, I want to grab this string and tear it apart and get the part that I want out of it. I'm going to hit comma to move to the next parameter. And it's going to say, where do you want to start this count? And so I'm going to not take the first character. I'm not going to take the second character. I'm going to take the third character. And so I think if I hit 3, it'll start grabbing that third character, that 0, 1 that I'm looking for. And then I hit comma to get to the third parameter that's asking me for. It's asking me, okay, so you're starting at the third character. How many characters do you want to grab? Well, I want to grab the third character and the fourth character. I want to grab 2 characters. So we'll put a 2 in there. And hopefully it'll give me 0, 1 and not 1, 0. Sure enough, I got the right combination in there. And we can double check it by dragging it down to see once we get out of that first month, does it continue to grab those middle 2 values, and it does. So now we've got a way of tearing apart that string value in a way that allows for us to do some other interesting things with that. So one of the things that I'm going to oftentimes want to do with that is I'm going to want to combine my year with my country names, because there's a lot of data out there that I'm going to want to link into this data set that's not in terms of just a country, but it's data that's related to a country in a particular year. So GDP, for example, every year there's a different value for each country. And in order to bring that data in, I need to be able to talk about what's happening in a particular country year. Likewise, if I was going to aggregate this data and look at it sort of at a year level, I probably want to separate out each country in each year and aggregate it that way. So I can create a new variable combining my actor code or my actor name, so USA, Great Britain, France, I think is there, Japan, with my year. And to do that, I'm not going to be adding them together in the way that I added 66 to 1900 to get 1966, because here we're working with string values, and I don't want them sort of mathematically combined. I want them combined sort of like text. And so Excel has a couple different ways that you can do this, a couple different formulas that will do this for you. So the formula that's sort of official, I guess, would be concatenate. And so I'm going to type con, and sure enough, it pops up. I think you can also do concat. That's maybe a deprecated version, but I'll just click concatenate. And then it's going to ask me for what chunk of text do I want? Well, I want my country name, so G2, comma, and then ask me for my next piece of text that it wants to bring in. And I want to bring in a piece of text here from C2. And I just want those 2, and so I'm going to close it up there. And sure enough, it combines those 2 strings and just kind of links them together into a single 7-character string. So that works okay. I can copy and paste that down just like before, and sure enough, it consistently is grabbing whatever's in column C and whatever's in column G and combining those together. So concatenate is really useful. It's not the only way that you can do this, and so I'll actually do this a slightly different way. A lot of Excel actually runs on top of something called Visual Basic Applications, which is Microsoft's sort of programming language. And in Visual Basic, if you want to combine strings together, you can just use an ampersand, and you can combine cell values together, or you can also combine other bits of string. And so if I wanted to add a space in there, I could either do that with the concat function, the concatenate function, add an extra chunk for a space, or I could do, let's see, G2, and instead of plus to combine, I'm going to use an ampersand sign to combine, and then I'm going to create a quote and a space, and I'm going to do another ampersand sign because I just want to stick multiple different strings together. I want to stick the country name to the space. I want to stick the space to the year. And so I'll ampersand that and combine that with C2. And I think I can hit enter. And yeah, it continues to do the task of sort of sticking these things together, but now it's added a space in the middle. And again, I can do that with the concat as well, just adding that sort of middle thing. But sometimes it's easier to just write with the ampersands rather than working with the formulas. If I don't like the space, I can do an underscore, or I can get rid of it. The point is I can use these functions to put strings back together, just as I can use them to tear them apart. Okay, so there's lots of the stuff you can do with strings. Sometimes we want to change values en masse. And so there is a substitute formula that I could show you in Excel, but oftentimes it's easier to just use a find and replace. And so Here I have month values that are set up as 0, 1, 0, 2 kind of setup, but that's not a very common way of communicating month values, and that's maybe not as super intuitive. Maybe I want to change that formatting to include the sort of 3-letter abbreviations that we oftentimes use with months. And so in that case, I'm going to hit Control. Actually, I'm going to highlight the column I want to do a find and replace on, and I'm going to hit Control H to bring up that find and replace window. And in that, I'm just going to type 01 for that first month. And for replace, I'm going to replace it with capital letters JAN for January. And again, I want to make sure that I've highlighted just the section that I want to find and replace on, because what I don't want to do is I don't want to do this across my entire data set and turn all of my day 01 values into January. But I'm in the month column. And so if I hit replace all, it'll tell me that it made 26 replacements, which doesn't sound like that many. Actually, it's not that many. Let me try this. Copy, paste a special. And let's try this again. Control H, find and replace. I have 01. I'm going to replace that with January. Let's try to replace all. There it went. I had to get rid of my formulas for some reason. And now I've replaced all the 01s with January. Here I can do it again. And instead of replacing 01, I can replace 02 and replace that with February. And in a matter of 30 seconds, I can replace all of my months and have a different format that maybe is more easily interpretable. So find and replace ends up being really handy. One place I find that this works really well is eliminating missing values. So if you have -9 as sort of a placeholder for missing values, maybe you want to grab that column and just immediately just wipe all those away so that they're no longer part of your data set. You can do that by finding replace -9 with nothing, just leave it blank, and it will erase those. And so that's a pretty common way of using that. We can also use it to recode things or regroup things. I would just sort of recommend, if you're recoding and regrouping, always think through so that you don't copy into a value that you're then going to be using and recopying and changing. So one last thing I want to show you about working with text. I don't know that this is necessarily just a text sort of thing, but I end up using it a lot when I'm working with text. And that is using an if function. And so I have this variable here that I want to create, which is a particular actor an intergovernmental organization. And the way that McClellan had sort of designated intergovernmental organizations is that he has sort of this IGO code, but sometimes he's designating a specific IGO. And so there's a 4th letter, or I think even sometimes a 5th letter associated with that that country code, but it always starts with IGO. And so if I'm interested in, is there an IGO that's an actor in this column B, what I really want to ask is are the first 3 letters of that country code IGO? And if they are, then I want to flag that and say, yeah, that's an IGO. That's an intergovernmental organization like the United Nations. And if it's not, I want to say, no, it's not. Well, Excel has a formula that allows us to do that. It allows us to sort of ask basic questions about things that are happening in our data. And if we find the answer is true, we can do one thing. If we find the answer is false, we can do another. And so that's the if function, or the if formula. And so I'm just going to type in equals if, and it says checks whether a condition is met and returns one value for true and another value for false. Okay. Parenthesis, let's start that formula off. It says, what's your logical test? Well, I have to ask it a question. And so in this case, I'm going to say, is the length, I'm sorry, is the, let's do left number of characters in this string, and we'll grab 3 of them. So I've grabbed those first 3 characters from that string, and we're going to ask, is that IGO? Is that equals quotation marks because I'm typing on a string, close the quotation marks. Is it equal to that chunk of text? And if the answer is yes, then I want to get maybe the value 1. So I put comma and a 1. And if it's no, I'm going to put a comma and move to that last value. If false, I'm going to put a 0. And hopefully, when I click on this, it should give me the result of 0 because this chunk of text here is Korea, and the first 3 characters of that, KOR, is not equal to IGO, so it should yield false. Oh, I hit a wrong key there. It got rid of that for me. Thank you, Excel. All right, and it gave me a 0, and that seems to be working. I can test the function a little bit more by copying it down. And yeah, all of these, the first 3 characters from the left are not IGO. Here they are. And so that seems to be working. And interestingly, it's not checking to see if this entire string is IGO. It's only checking to see if the first 3 characters are IGO. And so that's kind of handy. And I can copy and paste that down. And now I've found a way to kind of turn what McClellan had given me, which was the name of actors sort of arranged according to his own little sort of personal notation, into something that maybe I can use for my own purposes. And I can do that relatively quickly. You know, I can copy and paste all this stuff down for my 60,000 or so cases, just because I know how to kind of manipulate some of the logical tools that Excel gives us for working with strings. One additional thing I'm going to maybe show really quickly is the trim function in Excel. Trim removes spaces that might be leading spaces or lagging spaces. So if you have something you copied in a bunch of text and it's got, you know, a string of like 8 or 9 spaces behind, and you're going to try and combine that together with other text, sometimes that can make it messy. It can look difficult. And so the trim function ends up being really handy to just kind of delete out extra spaces. You just type out trim, give it an open parentheses to start the function. It only takes 1 parameter. What's the block of text you're working with? What's the cell you're interested in? I select my cell, close the, I'm not able to type well. Oh, no, I did. It's up here. Close out the parenthesis, and then it takes that and removes out any extra spaces that might be there. Interestingly, it does not remove spaces that exist between words, which is kind of handy if you're worried about just, you know, hitting find and replace, replacing spaces. You're going to smash your words together. The trim just removes on the outside of those things. So those are some of the common tools that get used with manipulating text and with reworking text. There's dozens of other things that you can do, but you can get a lot of mileage out of this particular group.